Hello, welcome to this presentation on making the case for burnout awareness and prevention in community-based work. My name is Charles Levinson, and I'm a master's student in the Community and Social Change program in the School of Education and Human Development at the University of Miami. It's my intention that this presentation be used by anyone who might put it to good use, so feel free to save it for personal reference or share it with your colleagues. So before we get into the details, I just want to give a little overview of what this presentation will cover. So first, a little introduction to burnout where we talk about what it is. Then we're going to talk about some common assumptions about burnout. Then we're going to discuss the three main factors that lead to it. And finally, we're going to end with how to beat burnout, both at the individual and the organizational level. Burnout is an interesting phenomenon because it's something that occurs surprisingly frequently considering how often it's talked about. This module is more of an awareness builder and a conversation starter, a way to get you to start talking with people in your organization about burnout. Don't get me wrong, I love the idea of finding a job you love and never having to work a day in your life, but that doesn't mean you won't still experience stress. Working with communities is never easy. That's why so few have the wherewithal to do it well. Even within a nonprofit, due to budgeting and talent constraints, staff members often wear multiple hats, with the disembodied arm of their supervisor, chair, or funders adding more hats all the time. One doesn't pursue such work for the paycheck, nor to work an effortless 40-hour week. So what kind of person thrives in this crazy environment? It's often said that you need the head, the heart, and the hand. These careers are for individuals who believe in the causes they fight for those with the analytical ability to track and trust data, the passion to mobilize others for their cause, and the organizational ability and skills to be accountable and effective in multiple roles. Of course, during this work, you're dealing with tons of external pressures. Talks about constituent needs, reaching goals, inevitable problems with technology, and potentially unreliable staff and partners. Hey, they're dealing with all these things too. This is only a few examples, and it's already a lot to handle. It all adds on to or exacerbates whatever internal struggles you're facing. Am I having the impact I was hoping for? Will I be able to raise children the way I want to and prepare for retirement? What about my other goals? Of course, we don't have to be so deficit-based, but it is important to understand where your issues stem from. Soon, we'll get to this question, and the answer may surprise you. But let's say you don't cope with all that's weighing you down. None of us want to be in this position, where working overtime becomes the norm and you still never feel caught up. Sound familiar? Then you may be experiencing burnout. Burnout is defined as exhaustion of physical or emotional strength or motivation, usually as a result of prolonged stress or frustration. But don't go blaming yourself for this just yet. In fact, victimizing yourself will only make you feel worse, and burnout is actually surprisingly common. It's estimated that 21 to 67% of mental health workers experience burnout, and it's safe to assume a similar level for community-based human service workers. Now, before we debunk some common assumptions about burnout, it is important that we understand the distinction between stress and burnout, because while stress is a contributing factor of burnout, they are not the same thing. Stress is characterized by overengagement, but burnout by disengagement. When you're stressed, your emotions are overreactive, but when you experience burnout, emotions are blunted. Stressed individuals have a sense of urgency and hyperactivity, while ones suffering from burnout experience helplessness and hopelessness. Stress causes a loss of energy, while burnout causes a loss of motivation, ideals, and hope. Stress leads to anxiety disorders, while burnout leads to detachment and depression. And stress causes physical damage, while the damage done by burnout is primarily emotional. And finally, stress may kill you prematurely, but burnout may make life not seem worth living. It's important to understand this distinction because while the ideal situation is to prevent burnout in the first place, the next best thing is to correctly identify the symptoms as early as possible. That being said, let's discuss and debunk the three most common assumptions about burnout. Assumption 1. Burnout isn't even a real thing. I'm just in a slump. While burnout is not a recognized psychological disorder according to the DSM-5, its symptoms parallel anxiety, depressive, and mood disorders in many ways. and it should be taken seriously. Psychological disorders are a taboo topic in our society, so imagine the extent to which burnout gets shunned from our collective consciousness. Stress management is one of those life skills that is absolutely crucial to being successful, but rarely talked about or taught. It's a type of skill being pushed out of our public schools and left out of our professional development sessions at work. Assumption number 2. If I'm experiencing burnout and other people in my organization are not, then it's my problem alone. It's easy and typical in American society to focus praise and blame at the individual level. But think about it. Burnout is caused by overwhelming stress, which at least partly, if not entirely, originates from work. Once an individual begins to suffer from burnout, productivity drops, which makes the organization suffer. Thus, burnout is definitely an issue faced by organizations, not just individuals, and should be viewed as such. Of course, you don't have to take my word for it. This has actually been established in research. It's a phenomenon called socially induced burnout, and it's based on the idea of emotional contagion, the tendency to automatically mimic and synchronize facial expressions, vocalizations, postures, and movements with those of another person, and, consequently, to converge emotionally. So if you're part of a team with individuals who, due to burnout, lack the capacity to succeed, other team members will suffer as team efficacy spirals downward. Note that this process is automatic. It occurs subconsciously, but the same can occur consciously through a process of empathy. If you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes who's doing much worse off than you, you're going to experience the same phenomenon. The last assumption is that I should strive to be stress-free. Hakuna Matata. Wouldn't this solve all of our problems? Sure, the concept of a worry-free life sounds great in The Lion King, until Simba realizes he stopped caring about his family and the kingdom he was supposed to inherit. The lesson here is that the only way to be stress-free is to not care at all. We already discussed this in the beginning. You're in this career because you do care. It's one of your biggest strengths and motivating factors, and you should never take that away. In fact, burning out is a process that makes you not care, and the research has explored this as well. Stress is not only necessary in order to care, it also improves performance. You've probably seen a graph like this before, where too little stress leads to boredom, too much to anxiety, and the right amount to optimal performance. Melch has developed a model for this process. Lacking the capacity to complete one's assignments leads to burnout, and he uses the term rust out to describe when the opposite occurs. The question is, how do we maintain an optimal level of stress while fulfilling the needs of partners, coworkers, and constituents? The suggestions here are a start, but they're all actions an individual might take. Remember the question, are your own strengths enough? Perhaps not, if you aren't empowered by your organization to make necessary change. You already work hard for your organization. What you need is an organization that also works hard for you. But what parts should your organization be expected to help with? What if you're just a perfectionist and hold yourself to higher standards than everyone else, including your supervisor? Well, let's take a look at the 3 main factors that cause burnout: personality traits, work-related factors, and lifestyle choices. All personality traits have their own pros and cons, but if you're perfectionistic, pessimistic, controlling, reluctant to delegate, or a type A personality, you're going to be predisposed to burning out. At work, if you feel you have little control, aren't recognized for your hard work, don't understand or can't handle the expectations others place on you, if you're stuck with monotonous work, or if the environment isn't a good fit for you, your workplace might be a burnout factory. Regarding your personal lifestyle, if you're choosing to work too much, if you have too many outside responsibilities, such as taking care of kids, working other jobs, or taking classes on nights and weekends, if the people in your life expect too much for you to handle, if you don't sleep well, or if you lack supportive relationships, you've got lifestyle factors that can contribute to burnout. Now, when you're doing work that involves values, emotions, and human beings, work can become very personal. So you could make the case that an organization can help with any or all of these factors, but it may be wisest to pick and choose. Identify which factors are contributing most to your burnout or stress and start there. Again, if your issue lies in your personality traits, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. If you want to change yourself, you may, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons. Otherwise, you might create more problems than you solve. The key here is to transform your relationship with work. Does your pessimism only become a problem when working on a specific project? Maybe it's best to pass that project along or reconsider its goals. An internal reluctance to delegate can be balanced out with stronger team building and support from staff members. While personality is important, the research has shown that organizational climate can't be overlooked. Research on teacher burnout has found that the more supportive the school organizational climate is perceived to be, the more likely the teacher is to not experience burnout. This further underscores the point that while individuals need to be a good fit for an organization and type of work, it's equally important that organizations work to maintain a healthy environment. Maintain is the key word here, because this is not an effort that gets accomplished during a mid-year and end-of-year evaluation or just before the annual budget is set. This should be a consistent priority, which would require a commitment to organizational learning, which helps the organization continually improve, achieve goals, and attain new possibilities, taps into employee aspirations, fueling commitment, and creating the energy to change. As Peter Drucker wrote, people are the organization's most valuable resource. Which leads us to action steps regarding lifestyle. As Renaga Biko put it in her book, How to Maintain a Healthy Relationship with Work, the relationship one is able to form with his or her place of work may impact many other facets of his or her life. Why does this relationship sometimes become parasitic rather than symbiotic? Even the nonprofit sector exists within the rules and systemic issues of a capitalist society that has, in many ways, lost its human dimensions. An inherent imbalance forms, because in community-based work, the human dimension is the most important part. We've covered a lot of ground so far. We've discussed who you are, what burnout is, what burnout isn't, how it differs from stress, the factors that cause it, and some preliminary actions to address those factors or prevent them from occurring in the first place. Remember, you are the expert of your situation. Despite the suggestions included here, the goal of this presentation was not to solve any problems, but to help you and your organization discover your own solutions. Any work you do in this realm will pay off immensely down the line, because this is an opportunity to improve your processes and outcomes in work and in life. For additional resources, check out Maslach's and Leader's The Truth About Burnout, How Organizations Cause Personal Stress and What to Do About It. If you work with particularly difficult populations, and your compassion regarding your cause has diminished over time, another important construct that may be worth a look is compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue sometimes looks like burnout, but is caused by secondary trauma rather than tedious and stressful work environments. That's the end of this presentation. I hope you learned a lot and will be an active advocate in your organization for burnout awareness and prevention. Thank you for viewing.